A grandmother maid is humiliated by a rich family until she returned with $1 million check. Behind the worn uniform of an elderly housekeeper, despised by her wealthy employers, who treated her as invisible, hid a silent and powerful force, waiting for the perfect moment to turn the tables of power and teach a lesson that no fortune could buy and that would forever change everyone's destiny. Stay until the end and don't forget to subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. The Harrington mansion stood imposingly against the Boston skyline, its Greek columns and gleaming windows symbolizing the power and wealth accumulated over generations. Clara Wilson, a 67-year-old woman with gray hair always tied in a simple bun, adjusted her worn uniform before entering through the back door, as she had done for 8 years. The aroma of fresh coffee and freshly baked bread filled the kitchen as she prepared breakfast for the family, who never directed anything more than orders to her. Her brown eyes, tired but dignified, carried stories that no one in the mansion had ever been interested in knowing. Her calloused hands worked with methodical efficiency, reflecting decades of honest work to support her family after her husband's premature death. Her modest salary as the Harringtons' housekeeper was the main source of income to help her only grandson, Thomas, attend engineering school. Clara took a deep breath, mentally preparing herself for another day of hard work and derogatory comments that she had learned to endure in silence. "Clara, this silverware is stained again. Frankly, I wonder if your eyesight is still adequate for this work," said Margot Harrington in her affected voice, examining an impeccable silver spoon against the light. Richard Harrington barely raised his eyes from his financial newspaper, accustomed to the constant criticism his wife directed at the staff. The Harrington twins, Ethan and Isabella, recent graduates from Ivy League universities, laughed discreetly as they deliberately left crumbs scattered across the mahogany table to give the housekeeper more work. "The Petersons' new maid is only 30 years old and already does a much superior job to yours, dear Clara," Margot continued with false sweetness, as Clara silently collected the dishes. A slight tremor in Clara's wrinkled hands was the only external sign of the humiliation she felt, but years of adversity had forged in her a silent resistance. Margot made a dismissive gesture, sending Clara away from the dining room as if she were an unwanted object. "Frankly, Richard, I don't understand why we still keep such obsolete staff," Margot commented, loud enough for Clara to hear as she withdrew with the dishes. The afternoon brought to the Harrington mansion a parade of distinguished guests for the famous annual charity tea organized by Margot in supposed support of underprivileged children. Clara moved discreetly among the elegant guests, serving canapés and champagne on silver trays, becoming practically invisible to the eyes of Boston's high society. "Clara, these glasses have fingerprints. How do you expect me to offer drinks like this to my guests?" Margot hissed as she abruptly pulled her into a corner, ensuring that several guests witnessed the reprimand. Socialite Victoria Esther audibly commented, "It's so difficult to find good help these days, isn't it, dear? Especially when they insist on working beyond retirement age." Polite laughter echoed through the hall as Clara, her face burning with shame, quickly replaced the perfectly clean glasses with identical ones. "The Petersons have just hired that wonderful young woman from the premium agency. Perhaps it's time to consider an upgrade, Margot," suggested another guest, treating Clara like an outdated appliance. While serving the last guests, Clara accidentally dropped a glass when Isabella Harrington deliberately stretched out her foot to trip her. "Incompetent and clumsy," exclaimed Margot Harrington, her face contorted with anger as guests observed the scene with a mixture of amusement and false compassion. Clara immediately knelt to clean up the crystal shards, ignoring the sharp pain when a fragment cut her finger, a small drop of blood staining the Persian rug. Richard finally intervened, not out of concern for Clara but for the social embarrassment. "Perhaps it is indeed time to consider a replacement, Margot." Amid whispers and sidelong glances, the guests resumed their superficial conversations about charity as Clara finished cleaning up her own humiliation. At the end of the party, when the last guest had left, Margot handed Clara an envelope containing her weekly payment along with an ultimatum. "This will be your last month with us, Clara. Your age is clearly affecting your performance." Margot's cold words showed no recognition for 8 years of dedicated service. Clara accepted the envelope and the notice with silent dignity, thinking only of how she would support her grandson in the final semesters of college. That night, upon returning to her modest apartment in the less favored side of the city, Clara found a formal letter waiting for her in the mailbox. With trembling hands, Clara opened the envelope stamped, "Anderson, Myers and Blackwell, Attorneys at Law," expecting another bill or problem to solve. The letter, written in formal and respectful language, informed her that her distant cousin, Eleanora Wilson, had passed away, leaving her as the sole heir to a fortune accumulated in real estate investments and technology stocks valued at approximately $15 million. Clara reread the letter 3 times, unable to process the information that would completely transform her reality. Eleonora, 15 years older than Clara, had left for California decades ago, silently building an investment empire while maintaining minimal contact with the family. According to the letter, Eleonora had followed Clara's life from a distance, admiring her resilience and integrity in raising her son alone after her husband's death. The lawyer requested a meeting to formalize the transfer of assets and explain the details of the will, mentioning that there was a specific condition related to the initial use of part of the inheritance. Clara fell asleep that night, still employed by the Harringtons, but for the first time in decades, her dreams were not disturbed by financial worries. The meeting with Mr. Anderson, a distinguished gray-haired lawyer with a gentle smile, confirmed what the letter had announced. Clara was now a multi-millionaire woman. Your cousin Eleonora was a brilliant investor and a private person who valued character above all else, exclaimed the lawyer as he presented the detailed documentation of the inheritance. Among properties in San Francisco, shares in technology companies, and offshore bank accounts, the total fortune slightly exceeded $18 million, a figure that Clara could barely comprehend. The only condition of the will was that Clara should make a significant investment in a local business within the next 6 months, thus perpetuating Eleonora's philosophy of supporting entrepreneurs. Miss Eleonora also left this personal letter for you, said Mr. Anderson, handing Clara a sealed envelope with her name written in her late cousin's elegant handwriting. In the privacy of her apartment, Clara read Eleonora's moving words, explaining how she had always admired her from afar for her strength and dignity in the face of adversity. As silent tears ran down her wrinkled face, Clara made a decision about what she would do with her new fortune, and about how she would handle her last week working at the Harrington mansion. The last days at the Harrington mansion were strangely liberating for Clara, who performed her duties with the same dedication as always, but now protected by a secret that completely changed her perspective on daily humiliations. Clara, these windows are filthy. Is your vision really so compromised by age? Isabella provoked during breakfast, receiving only a serene smile in response. Margot continued her derogatory treatment, announcing to friends on the phone that she would finally replace that incompetent old woman with someone younger and more efficient. On her last day, Clara was informed that she would not be needed for the important business dinner the Harringtons would host that night for potential investors, including the mysterious new owner of Boston's largest real estate development company. Turn in your clean uniform before you leave and stop by the library to receive your final payment, Margot instructed coldly, offering no thanks for the years of service. Clara nodded politely, keeping to herself the knowledge that very morning she had finalized the purchase of a company that had just acquired controlling interest in Harrington Investments, following the advice of her new financial consultant. The night of the important dinner arrived, and the Harringtons received their guests with the usual refinement and pretension, completely unaware of the turnaround that was about to occur. The new majority investor in Boston Prime Developments will arrive soon. This deal could save our finances after that fiasco in the Asian market, Richard anxiously muttered to Margot, referring to the recent losses that had left the Harrington Company on the verge of bankruptcy. The guests were chatting animatedly when the doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of the mysterious investor. Everyone was eagerly awaiting. Margot hurried to receive the important guest, her rehearsed smile freezing in an expression of absolute shock, when she opened the door and found Clara, elegantly dressed in a Chanel suit, with discreet but valuable jewelry and a posture that radiated quiet confidence. "Good evening, Mrs. Harrington. I hope I'm not late for dinner," Clara said serenely, handing her coat to the astonished butler as she passed by a petrified Margot. Richard Harrington choked on his whiskey when his assistant whispered in his ear, confirming that yes, Clara Wilson was now the majority owner of Boston Prime Developments, and, by extension, the main creditor and investor of the nearly bankrupt Harrington Investment. The silence that followed Clara's entry into the main hall was broken only by the sound of the champagne glass that escaped Isabella's trembling fingers, shattering into 1,000 fragments on the marble floor. "Perhaps someone should clean that up. It's a shame you've dismissed the housekeeper," Clara observed, with a slight smile, while the other guests watched the scene with growing interest. Richard partially recovered from the initial shock and tried to take control of the situation, Clara, what a wonderful surprise. We didn't know you and the investor knew each other. With a natural elegance that seemed to have always been present, only hidden beneath a simple uniform, Clara replied, "Actually, Mr. Harrington, I am the investor, or should I say the majority investor in Boston Prime Developments, and consequently in Harrington Investments." Ethan and Isabella exchanged horrified looks, while Margot visibly paled, her hand seeking support on the arm of the nearest sofa. The other guests, many of whom had witnessed the humiliating treatment dispensed to Clara during charity teas, watched the scene with barely disguised fascination. Clara calmly walked to the center of the room, her new accountant beside her handing her a folder of documents, which she opened with tranquility. "I believe we have important business to discuss tonight, don't we?" The business meeting that followed was conducted with professional precision by Clara and her team of consultants, making it clear to all present that she was perfectly aware of the Harringtons' precarious financial situation. "My proposal is simple. Harrington Investments will maintain its name and operational autonomy, but will immediately implement new management policies and social responsibility," Clara explained with the same calmness she demonstrated when organizing family events. Richard, now visibly nervous, tried to regain some semblance of control. "I'm sure we can reach a mutually beneficial agreement, Clara. After all, we're practically family after so many years, aren't we?" With a polite smile that did not reach her eyes, Clara replied, "Business is business, Miss Harrington. I believe that's one of the first lessons I learned observing your family." Margot remained silent, her gaze alternating between disbelief and horror, as she processed the complete power inversion that had occurred. Among the new policies presented by Clara was a comprehensive benefits program for domestic and corporate employees, including fair wages, health insurance, and retirement funds. At the end of the meeting, when the documents were signed and the other guests had left, Clara handed Richard a substantial check. "This is the payment for the family's majority control of the company's shares, exactly the amount you need to avoid personal bankruptcy, not a penny more." The following morning, as news about the extraordinary turnaround in the Harrington family business began to circulate in Boston social circles, Clara met with her grandson Thomas at a quiet cafe in downtown. "Grandma, did you really buy their company?" Thomas asked incredulously, still processing the story Clara had just shared. With a serene smile, Clara explained that she had followed the advice of her late cousin Eleonora, investing in a business she knew intimately after years of closely observing its operation. "This isn't about revenge, Thomas. It's about restoring balance and creating something positive from a situation that for years was negative," Clara explained as she showed her grandson her plans to transform the company into a model of social responsibility. The young man looked at his grandmother with new eyes, realizing that the strength and dignity he had always seen in her now manifested on a much larger scale. Clara discreetly consulted her wristwatch, a gift she had bought for herself. "Now I must go. I have a meeting with the Harrington Mansion staff to discuss important management changes." Before saying goodbye, Clara handed her grandson an envelope containing documents that would guarantee not only full payment for his studies, but also initial capital for the sustainable engineering project he dreamed of developing after graduation. Clara's arrival at the Harrington Mansion that afternoon caused a commotion among the staff, who had been informed about the surprising change of circumstances, but were still trying to understand what it would mean for them. "Please everyone gather in the main hall. I have some important announcements to make," Clara requested gently, her voice now carrying a natural authority that never needed to be imposed. Margot and Richard observed the scene from the top of the staircase, their faces a mask of forced courtesy that barely disguised the humiliation of seeing their former employee conducting a meeting in their own home. Clara presented the new benefits system for all household staff, including significant salary increases, regulated working hours, and a retirement fund for each one. Additionally, any form of disrespectful treatment by employers will be grounds for immediate review of the employment contract, Clara explained, her gaze briefly meeting Margot's. The butler, who had served the Harrington family for 2 decades in silence, was the first to express gratitude with contained tears. "Mrs. Wilson, on behalf of all of us, thank you for seeing what has always been invisible in this house." At the end of the meeting, Clara addressed Margot and Richard directly. "As new employees of Boston Prime Developments, you will maintain your executive positions and continue living in this residence, which now belongs to the company. However, I expect the new policies of mutual respect to be strictly observed." The following weeks brought profound changes not only for the Harringtons, but for the entire corporate structure that now responded to Clara's vision. The new corporate social responsibility programs are already having a positive impact on the market. The financial director informed during a board meeting, showing graphs indicating growth in stocks after the announcement of the new policies. Clara listened attentively to each report, asking insightful questions that revealed a business understanding she had silently developed during years of observation. Richard Harrington, now subordinate to Clara, proved surprisingly adaptable to the new reality, gradually recognizing the value of the implemented changes. These results are impressive. I must admit that we never considered that investing in employees could generate such returns, he commented during a presentation, receiving a nod of acknowledgement from Clara. Margot, on the other hand, maintained a silent resistance to the new order, her wounded pride manifesting in acidic comments whispered at the social events she still attended. The Harrington twins, Ethan and Isabella, after their father's firm intervention, began to work effectively in the company for the first time, discovering that they would need to prove their worth on their own merit. In just 1 month, Boston Prime Developments had become a case study in business magazines for its rapid transformation from a traditional family company to a progressive management model. The first major charity event under the new administration was organized at the Harrington Mansion, now officially renamed the Wilson Harrington Cultural Center, in honor of both the new owner and the family's legacy. This event will raise funds for educational programs aimed at low-income elderly who wish to re-enter the job market or develop new skills, Clara explained to the journalist present, who now eagerly sought her out for interviews. The main hall, which had previously witnessed so many discreet humiliations, now welcomed guests genuinely interested in social causes, many of whom looked curiously at the Harringtons, relegated to a secondary role in their own former domain. Victoria Astor, who had so often belittled Clara during Margot's tease, approached with an inauthentic smile. "Clara, darling, I always knew you were special. What an extraordinary vision you have for business." With the same dignity she had maintained during years of degrading treatment, Clara responded, "It's interesting how some people can only see value in others when it comes accompanied by zeros on the right, isn't it, Victoria?" The socialite walked away disconcerted, while Thomas, now graduated and responsible for the company's new sustainability division, observed his grandmother with admiration. 6 months after the surprising turnaround, Clara invited Margot for a private tea in the mansion's library, a meeting that left the former employer visibly apprehensive. "Margot, have you ever wondered why, among all the companies I could acquire, I specifically chose the one that would save your family from financial ruin?" Clara questioned as she served tea in porcelain cups she knew so well. Margot hesitated, her pride still struggling against the new reality. "I imagined for revenge, to humiliate us, as I humiliated you." With a negative nod, Clara calmly explained, "If it were revenge, I would simply let the company fail and buy this mansion at the subsequent auction. It would be much simpler and probably more satisfying in the short term." Confused, Margot observed Clara with renewed attention as she continued, "I chose to invest here precisely because I knew the wasted potential of this company and the people who comprise it, including you, Margot." The revelation provoked a prolonged silence, during which Margot seemed to really see Clara for the first time, not as an employee or a rival, but as a woman of extraordinary strength and vision. "For 8 years I observed you manage impeccable events, coordinate team and maintain high standards, valuable skills that were wasted on social frivolities, when they could have significantly contributed to the family business," Clara concluded, offering Margot not just a cup of tea, but a new perspective on herself. The proposal that Clara presented to Margot that afternoon was as unexpected as it was transformative. The direction of the company's new charitable foundation, with real autonomy and substantial resources to implement social impact programs. "You possess valuable connections and exceptional organizational skills. Why not apply them to something that really makes a difference?" Clara suggested, observing the internal struggle reflected in her former tormentor's face. Margot, whose identity had always been linked to her social position and the approval of her peers, now found herself facing an opportunity for redefinition that she had never considered possible. "Why would you offer me this, after everything, after how I treated you?" Margot asked, her voice stripped of its usual affected tone. With the wisdom that years of adversity had conferred upon her, Claire replied, "Because true power isn't in subjugating others, but in elevating them to their best potential. A lesson I learned by observing the negative effects of the opposite behavior." For the first time in decades, genuine tears shone in Margot Harrington's eyes, who now faced not just a change in circumstances, but a profound reevaluation of values. Clara left the formal proposal on the table and stood to leave, allowing Margot to reflect alone. Think of this as an opportunity not for redemption, but for discovery of who you really can be when freed from the artificial expectations that have imprisoned you for so long. The first project of the Harrington Wilson Foundation was launched 3 months later, a professional training center for domestic workers, offering not only technical training, but also legal guidance on labor rights and psychological support for dealing with challenging work environments. This center would not exist without the vision and dedication of our executive director, Clara announced during the inauguration ceremony, indicating Margot, who nervously awaited her moment to speak. Before an audience composed of both domestic workers and former members of her exclusive social circle, Margot Harrington stepped forward, visibly transformed, not only in appearance, her style now more sober and professional, but mainly in posture. I dedicated decades of my life building walls to keep people away, classifying them according to superficial criteria that I now recognize as completely empty. Margot began, her voice firm despite the unprecedented vulnerability she demonstrated. Margot's honest and reflective speech surprised everyone, especially those who had known her for years and had never witnessed any sign of self-criticism or genuine empathy. At the end of the ceremony, Clara observed with discreet satisfaction how Richard shook his wife's hand with a new kind of respect, and how the twins Ethan and Isabella watched their mother with expressions that mixed surprise and reluctant admiration. The first anniversary of the corporate and personal transformation was marked by a special report in Business Weekly magazine, highlighting not only the impressive financial results, but mainly the social impact of the initiatives implemented under Clara's leadership. Miss Wilson's true innovation wasn't technological or financial, but human. She proved that treating people with dignity is not only ethically right, but also strategically intelligent, stated the article, accompanied by photographs showing the new facilities and the genuine smiles of employees. In her new office on the corporate building's top floor, Clara welcomed Thomas and his fiancée Samantha for a celebratory lunch, the young couple animatedly sharing details about their sustainable housing project for low-income communities. "Grandma, the magazine practically canonized you. What do you think about being called the most inspiring corporate reformer of the decade?" Thomas joked, showing the article that Clara had purposely not read. With the same serene smile that had become her trademark, Clara responded, "What matters to me are not the titles, but the real changes that affect real lives, like the Rodriguez family, who can now send all 3 children to university thanks to our scholarship program for employees' children." Samantha, a brilliant young architect, observed thoughtfully, "The most extraordinary thing is how you transformed a potential story of revenge into one of collective renewal. That is true power." On a cold autumn morning, Clara received an unexpected visit in her office. Eleanor Williams, Boston's most influential socialite, and Margot's former ally in the times when humiliating staff was considered an acceptable sport. "Clara, I hope I'm not interrupting. Margot suggested I speak directly with you about a possible partnership for this year's charity gala," said Eleanor, her posture evidencing the discomfort of someone in unfamiliar territory. With professional courtesy, Clara indicated the chair in front of her. "Not at all, Eleanor. I always have time to discuss genuine charitable initiatives." The subtle emphasis on the word genuine didn't go unnoticed by Eleanor, who for decades had organized supposedly philanthropic events that primarily served as a platform for social self-promotion. With unusual hesitation, Eleanor explained her proposal for an emergency fund for domestic workers facing medical or family crises. "Margot mentioned that you had a similar idea a few months ago. I thought perhaps we could join efforts," Eleanor concluded, her tone revealing the strangeness of requesting a partnership with someone she would previously have considered inferior. Clara studied the proposal with genuine attention, recognizing the merit of the initiative, regardless of her history with the proposer. "I believe this is an excellent opportunity to demonstrate that significant changes are possible when unlikely people work together for a common goal." The second anniversary of what the press now called the Wilson Revolution was celebrated with the launch of state legislation inspired by the business policies implemented by Clara, establishing new standards of protection for domestic workers in Massachusetts. This law would not have been possible without the pioneering model developed by Mrs. Wilson and without the unexpected political support mobilized by Mrs. Harrington, declared State Senator Janet Chen during the signing ceremony. Seated side by side in the front row, Clara and Margot represented an unlikely alliance forged not by convenience, but by an authentic personal and professional evolution. Richard Harrington, now completely converted to the new business philosophy, presented the impressive numbers demonstrating how dignified treatment and fair compensation had increased productivity and reduced employee turnover at all levels. After the ceremony, during the reception, Clara was approached by a young reporter who asked the question everyone wanted to ask, but few dared. Mrs. Wilson, considering your history with the Harringtons, how did you manage to transform what could have been personal revenge into a positive corporate revolution? With the serene wisdom that had become her trademark, Clara replied, true transformation never comes from retaliation, which only perpetuates negative cycles. It comes from the courage to visualize and implement something entirely new, where everyone has the opportunity to evolve. The transformation in Clara's life reverberated beyond corporate circles, deeply affecting her local community and her own family. Thomas had completed his master's degree in sustainable engineering and now led the company's innovative ecological development division, implementing green technologies in all real estate projects. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, Clara gathered with her small family for lunch in the garden of the modest but comfortable house she had bought for herself, preferring cozy simplicity to the ostentatious luxury of the corporate mansion. Grandma, the foundation approved the funding for the social housing project in Roxbury, Thomas announced enthusiastically, showing the plans on his tablet. Clara smiled with genuine pride, not only for her grandson's professional success, but mainly for the character he demonstrated by prioritizing projects with social impact. Samantha, now Thomas's wife and 6 months pregnant, commented thoughtfully, it's amazing to think that all this began with an inheritance and a courageous decision to break negative cycles instead of perpetuating them. Clara observed the young couple with serenity, silently reflecting on how the adverse circumstances she had faced for decades had paradoxically prepared the ground to create something much greater and more meaningful than she had ever imagined possible. The future great-granddaughter that Samantha carried would grow up in a world where the Wilson name meant integrity and positive transformation, a legacy much more valuable than any material fortune. On the third anniversary of the Wilson-Harrington Corporate New Era, a special event was organized at the Professional Training Center, bringing together employees, beneficiaries of social programs, and executives in a celebration that deliberately dissolved the old hierarchical barriers. When Clara Wilson entered my life, first as a housekeeper and then as a mentor, I did not yet understand that I was about to receive the greatest lesson anyone could teach me, Margot Harrington declared in her speech, her voice carrying an authenticity that would have been unthinkable years ago. Clara discreetly observed the scene from the back of the hall, preferring to avoid the spotlight that naturally gravitated in her direction whenever she appeared in public. Richard Harrington, now fully engaged in the new business philosophy, presented with genuine enthusiasm the results of the profit-sharing program implemented for all levels of employees. The most touching moment of the ceremony came when Maria Gonzalez, former cook of the Harrington Mansion and now director of the center's culinary program, presented the first group of graduates, 25 domestic workers, who had received professional certification and would be employed with fair wages and full benefits. Among emotional applause, Isabella Harrington, transformed by her own journey of self-discovery, personally announced the expansion of the scholarship program for children of domestic employees, a project she had embraced with surprising dedication. An international conference on new ethical business models brought Clara to San Francisco, where she would present the transformative experience of the Wilson-Harrington Corporation as a case study for entrepreneurs from around the world. True innovation isn't in creating new products, but in reimagining the human relationships that form the foundation of any successful enterprise, Clara explained to an attentive audience of executives, academics, and social activists. After her presentation, a young business administration student timidly stood up to ask how Clara had found the strength to forgive those who had humiliated her so deeply. With the quiet wisdom that now defined her public presence, Clara replied, "Forgiveness wasn't an act of generosity toward them, but an act of liberation for myself. I understood that transforming negativity into positive creation generates much more power than any revenge ever could." Backstage at the event, Clara was approached by Eleanor Williams, now her unlikely ally in reforming Boston's philanthropic practices. When I think of how many Clara Wilsons passed through our lives invisible because we never allowed ourselves to really see them, I feel a profound sadness for what we lost. Clara gently squeezed Eleanor's hand, recognizing not only her personal evolution, but also the fact that any significant social transformation requires unlikely allies working together beyond prejudices and personal histories. That night, in her hotel room overlooking San Francisco Bay, Clara received a video call from Thomas and Samantha, announcing the premature but healthy birth of her great-granddaughter, whom they had decided to name Eleanor Clara, in honor of both the distant cousin who had made everything possible and the matriarch who had transformed a financial inheritance into a moral legacy. In the 5 years that followed the surprising turnaround in Clara's and the Harringtons' lives, the Wilson management model had spread to dozens of corporations across the country, creating a small, silent revolution in the business world. The true success of the Wilson approach lies in the practical demonstration that humanity and profitability are not mutually exclusive, but rather complementary, wrote the Harvard Business Review in a detailed analysis that had become required reading in business schools. On a sunny spring afternoon, Clara walked through the corridors of the community center she had financed in her neighborhood of origin, observing with discreet satisfaction the various educational and cultural activities in progress. An elderly woman approached timidly, introducing herself as a former colleague from the times when Clara served as a housekeeper. "I never imagined that the quiet lady who endured so much with such dignity would one day become the symbol of transformation that you are today." With a gentle smile, Clara replied, "I'm still the same person, Dorothy, only the circumstances changed, allowing others to finally see what was always there." In the main conference room, Margot Harrington conducted with unexpected humility and efficiency a meeting about the expansion of training programs, her personal transformation as profound as the corporate change that Clara had catalyzed. Across the hallway, Richard patiently explained basic financial concepts to a group of domestic workers, his former sense of superiority completely dissolved by the genuine understanding of each individual's value regardless of their social position. On the 10th anniversary of the Wilson Revolution, as the transformation had been named by the media, an intimate celebration gathered at Clara's house. Only those truly close to her, including the complete Harrington family, and some employees who had become friends over the years. "I propose a toast to something extraordinary, that no money can buy, to the wisdom born from adversity, and to the courage to transform pain into creation," toasted Thomas, now a father of 3 children and a respected engineer, whose sustainable innovations had redefined construction standards across the country. Eleanor Clara, the 10-year-old great-granddaughter with the same serene dignity as her great-grandmother, presented a small speech she had prepared for the occasion. "My great-grandmother taught me that true power isn't in having control over others, but in having the strength to remain true to yourself when everything conspires to break you." Margot Harrington, with genuine tears in her eyes, asked to speak. "When I think of the arrogant and empty woman I was, and the countless lives that could have been transformed if I had discovered sooner what Clara taught me, I feel both remorse and gratitude, remorse for the time lost, and gratitude for the second chance." Clara observed the scene with the serenity that had become her trademark, her gaze momentarily finding the portrait of her cousin Eleonora on the wall, the woman who had made everything possible not only through the financial inheritance, but mainly by recognizing in Clara the character and vision necessary to transform it into something much greater than money. As everyone prepared to leave, Clara took her great-granddaughter's hand and whispered the secret of her extraordinary journey. "Always remember, dear, that our true inheritance is not the goods we possess, but the lives we touch and the positive changes we inspire. That is the only wealth that truly matters in the end." If you've come this far and this story has touched your heart, I invite you to keep this faith alive with us by subscribing to the channel and activating the notification bell so you don't miss any stories that touch the soul. And if this story has moved you, give it a like so we can continue sharing more stories like this one. Made with all our hearts. Until next time.